Do you feel that as a college student right now, like, do you feel that your voice matters?
Uh, I think it matters to an extent. Kind of makes it seem like everything is like, if I'm on this side, then I must believe these things, and if I'm on this side, I must believe these things. So, and there's only two choices. I think everyone thinks of everything as black or white, but there's sometimes gray. Before I would say I was a diehard conservative, and because I was on a conservative, I had a conservative view of things. Like, it pretty much seems like everything that anyone else says doesn't really matter, you know? So if someone has an opposing view to me, it's not like I'm listening to what they're saying. And I had a friend that talked to me, that challenged me about my thinking about this, and just how I would just be listening to the recent sound bites and all that. And it made me think whether or not like the way I'm thinking is valid, and if I'm thinking about just me being a part of this group that says they're conservative and doing this, or am I thinking about our future and how this all affects everybody, you know? If I'm looking at the greater good. And that's, I guess, a battle that I'm still trying to figure out.
And so then that leads us to kind of talk about like identity politics, right? What does that mean?
In our country, when we hear the phrase identity politics, it's always thought of in the way of what other people do. But the reality is that everything that happens in politics is about identity. What it means to be conservative in this country, truly conservative in terms of policy, is quite different from how conservatives may identify themselves. You know, I'm a person of faith. My faith is very important. It shapes how I am, it shapes my political views. But I wouldn't say that that aligns with how people traditionally view what it means to be conservative or progressive, because you can't talk about that without adding in the layers of race. When you ask people, how do you feel about the Black Lives Matter movement? And they have a particular view, without also thinking about the leaders of that movement, the founders of that movement were three Black women. But identity politics is also how young people envision themselves. When the reality is, as a country, we can't afford to wait for young people to become leaders. And identity doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's about standing in who you are, standing in your truth, and affirming that, and being able to say, if I can affirm the groups, the beliefs that are important to me, then I have to acknowledge that in you, because then that allows me to be empowered to express mine too.
Do you not feel like identity politics in some way has, I guess, kind of made separate sects of people, you know? Like,
So I think that identity politics has not. I think human nature has. I think it's human nature for me to look at you, to make whatever judgments I'm going to make, whether they are right or wrong. And so identity politics builds on that human nature to want to be distinct from other people or feel better than other groups.
When I'm thinking about like identity, when I think about like the assumptions that we make based on who someone is, right, or how they look, right? And so when like you talked about in the past, like having conservative views, there's certain assumptions that I think come along with people of color who will articulate that they have conservative views,
yep.
right? And so what like did you face any type of backlash or people looking at you some type of way, like when you say, well, I might be conservative, and what that meant for them?
I think black men, I'll say, that happen to have a conservative view have to kind of learn to, I don't want to say get in where you fit in, but like know, I guess, the climate of the people that you are hanging around. You know, if people are, I'm just someone that's not as I don't get easily offended at anything. I've tried to make sure that I'll listen to someone else's view, even if it's opposing to mine. Like, even people that think that, hey, if you're a Trump supporter, then you don't agree with Black Lives Matter, or if you're a Black Lives Matter supporter, you agree with everything that anyone writes Black Lives Matter under. That's what you agree with, like rioting or anything like that. But I think there's just a lot more to it than that. You know, I think people do not look at the entire picture, and it's easier to like pinpoint stuff. You know, it's easier to have a blanket rule on things rather than looking deeper, I suppose.
I think it raises this question of the expectations we have of ourselves and people who are like us and who share our views, and the expectations we have of others. So, you know, as an example, why do we think that the leadership of Black Lives Matter should make a statement or apologize for rioting or looting that happens at a legitimate protest? But we don't have that same expectation of the NRA, for example, when a mass shooting happens, because we're able to separate out the idea of there can be good intent and there can be bad actors and bad action. And I think that's what makes it hard for people to embrace any kind of label or political identity, because now they feel like I have to check off every box and ensure that I'm in perfect alignment, when that really is not a realistic expectation, because no one fits that standard. So instead of trying to be an exception, how do we recognize the fact that some people need to be accepted for who they are and where they are, and then how do we navigate from that point?
I've had the same experience, even thinking on just expounding more on Black Lives Matter. Do I agree with what they stand for, or in the beginning what it seemed like they stand for? Because now it seems like social media has a lot to do with everything, you know? The media has painted Black Lives Matter to be a certain way, which even if people have came together for peaceful protest, and now you have video cameras of just videotaping the opportunists that come and dismantle everything. Even if it was 3 women that started it and that was not their vision and this and this and that, like media has the outlet to just kind of change the definition of what something stands for.
And I think it's connected. Like when we say what can we do about it, or when we think about media, I mean, I think it relates to a form of identity politics, right? The assumptions that we make about populations and the treatment that they get in the press, right? Like when Dr. Brown-Dean talked about people being able to separate the NRA from mass shootings, right? But not being able to separate the opportunists that you mentioned from people who are out there actually fighting, you know, for their rights, and are practicing civil disobedience, but not necessarily rioting, right? There's certain populations of people based on the history of our country who get the benefit of the doubt in the press, and other people who don't, right? And so when we think about even the people who have recently been murdered, right? At the hands of police officers, one of the things that we know is going to happen is that they're going to be investigating what happened, but the smear is about to come. They're going to start to search for everything wrong with that person who died to try and justify the fact that they died, right? To say that their life wasn't worth keeping because they had an empty marijuana bag in their backpack, or they may have been suspended from school at one point in time. And so they find these ways to justify the death of people.